The following program does not necessarily reflect the opinions and viewpoints of the staff and management of the station.
Welcome to the wonderful world of seniors, the best of all worlds. You now have the time, resources, and ability to enjoy what you have worked for all your life. So let's explore the many possibilities available to seniors on Senior World Radio. Senior World Radio is your source for senior citizens-related topics, information, and entertainment. Now, here is your host of Senior World Radio, Glenn Howard.
Thanks so much for joining us today on Senior World Radio. A few weeks ago, I took the big map of Israel. You know, we've got that big map of Israel, 15 feet wide, 30 feet long. Took it out to a retirement center located out on the far southwest corner of Oklahoma City and set it up in a retirement facility called Village on the Park. Had about 40, 50 people there. We talked about Israel and the Middle East and all that was going on. And I met a couple there that very interesting couple by the name of Russell and Nell Long. When Russell told me his name was Russell Long, I said, oh, yeah, I know the name Russell Long. In fact, I remember the senator from Louisiana, 39, 40 years. I don't know how long he served, but probably one of the most powerful senators in the United States, certainly in Louisiana, who was, I think, chairman of the Finance Committee for many years. And if I recall correctly, he's the old boy who come up with the statement said that a lot of people's philosophy is don't tax me and don't tax you, but tax that fellow behind the tree, or something of that nature. I don't know. But I'm assuming that you're not the Russell Long who was the senator.
No, his father was my fifth cousin.
Okay. Yeah.
But I never met him. We went down to visit Russell's office in Lake Charles. Where? On the Mississippi.
Right.
And we saw pictures of his family and the old furniture from his homestead, I guess. But we never got to meet him, which is unfortunate. We're a little far removed from that era.
Well, I found Russell to be such a charming fellow, and particularly when I started talking to Nell and discovered, my goodness, they've lived all over the world. When I was talking about Israel, I discovered Nell said they had lived for some time in Saudi Arabia and just a lot of places. And so, Nell's a young kid. I think he's only 90 years of age or pretty close to it. Nell says she's got him beat a couple of years. She's 92, so she's had 2 years to get him trained and in shape. But they truly qualify for what we call some of Oklahoma's incredible seniors, who are just delightful people. And I wanted my listening audience to get a chance to know them a little bit better. Let's start out, first of all. Russell, are you a native Oklahoman?
I am. I was born near Sparks, north of Prague.
Okay, I know where Prague is. I've never heard of Sparks.
Well, it's where the epicenter of all the earthquakes that are going on now. But my grandfather made the run into Oklahoma, and he took my father and his older brother. My father was 11, and his older brother was 15. They rode their ponies on the run into Oklahoma in 1891.
Wow. Coming from where? Where had they been?
From northwest Arkansas, Harrison.
Okay.
I think it's called what mountain is that?
Gaither.
Gaither Mountain, west of Harrison, Arkansas. And they rode into Oklahoma, and my grandfather drove the stake next to the Sac and Fox Indian Agency there in Lincoln County.
Interesting.
And then he went back to Arkansas to get the family, who came in a Conestoga wagon and with my great-grandmother driving it.
Uh-huh.
And he left the two boys with their Winchester rifle and their ponies to ride off to the North Canadian River and water the ponies and shoot squirrels so they could
have something to eat. And now, how in the world do you come across this lovely lady that you married, Miss Nell? Where's she from?
She's in the Navy. That's the reason.
I'm from Pennsylvania.
Oh, well, in that's part of the country, we almost call those folks Yankees, I think. That's so far up
that's
north.
what we're called, is Yankees.
So how did you get from Pennsylvania down to Oklahoma?
I joined the Navy.
Okay.
I had no brothers, and my dad always lamented the fact that he would meet with the fellows for a beer, and he never had anybody to brag about, so I gave him the chance to brag about me.
Now, in those days, that was kind of unusual for a woman to join the Navy, wasn't it?
Very much so.
And your duties were probably quite different than they are today. What primarily did you do in the Navy?
I was an aviation machinist mate.
Aviation
machinist
mate.
mate. That was my title. But I never got to actually work on an airplane. They found out I was handy with a sewing needle, and they put me in the fabric shop, and I covered airplane parts. And Russ showed up one day.
Okay. Were you in the Navy too, Russ?
I was a cadet in training then.
Okay.
Yes, in the Navy Air Corps, and I finished all the groundwork, which took about a year, and I finally finished up down at the University of Georgia, and they transferred half of us back into the Navy, and the other half they let us go on to be trained to fly. So they sent our group to the Naval Air Station in Memphis, Millington, north of Memphis. And they said, well, boys, we have more cadets than we know what to do with, so you all go down and push airplanes and scrub grease and do whatever you can, and we'll get around to training you to fly later. So I was looking for a place in out of the weather, and I got into this area where they were sewing covers on airplane parts, and saw a little girl down there I thought I'd like to meet, so we got acquainted.
And it's been happy ever since.
Well, she used to save me a seat in the movie every evening because cadets and waves were not allowed to talk to each other. That was against the rules.
So how long have you been married now, Nell?
Since 1945. Got married the day after Christmas.
How about that?
59
That makes it
years.
about
69 years.
69 years?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And you're still sticking together.
We're working at it.
So once you got married, were you both still in the military? And
Well, we got married when we each got out in 1945 when the war
Okay,
was over.
Right.
And I don't know, I took her off to Oklahoma, and she's been in Okie ever since.
Home was where, in the Norman area here? Or you said you
Yes.
were there?
We've lived all over.
Okay. Let's start through some of them. You got married in Norman. Home there for how long? You remember?
Oh, we were married in Pittston, Pennsylvania,
Married in
Okay,
Pennsylvania.
went back to her home.
and got married, and
Right.
then left by train. And we took the train to Tennessee, to
Tennessee.
Knoxville, where my brother-in-law was an atomic physicist, and they had absolutely no place for us to hang our hat. So he got a reservation one night for us in the visiting area of the Oak Ridge atomic bomb plant. We stayed one night there, and one night with his boss had an extra bedroom we spent one night in, and then I left her with the family and went down to Miami, Florida, where I got released from the Marines in a couple of weeks. But she stayed with my sister and her husband, and it just happened that at that time my mother and father were there from Norman visiting for Christmas. So
That was
they
the first
met
time
their
I
new
had met.
daughter-in-law.
First time you met them, huh?
Uh-huh.
So then you moved back to Norman, lived there until you. Now you went into what profession? What was your business in?
Well, I went to work in the field on a seismic crew for Amoco out in West Texas.
Okay.
And
Oil business was booming at that time.
about 9 months later, I'd had enough of that, so we hitchhiked our way back to Norman and found a place to live, and I entered the university again under the GI Bill. And
Right.
in 2 years after that in Norman, I had got my degree, went back to work for Amoco. Started out in Houston and went from Houston to Chicago to all the Gulf Coast and 70 other places.
Okay, let's talk about now the Gulf Coast thing. When you moved over there, first of all, I know you lived for a time in Saudi Arabia, right?
Well, we lived in Aden, which is the south tip
Arabia.
of Arabia,
Okay.
and it was the center of the British protectorate at the time. We stayed there 4 years until the British were run off.
Okay, what was life like? Now, this would have been in 1950, what, approximately? Do you remember? That was after the war. You'd been here for a few
50 to 52.
50,
Well,
52, somewhere in there.
we were
Something
married
like
in
that.
45 at the
Okay.
end of the war.
So what was life like in the Middle East after the war there, say in 52,
Actually, at
55?
that time, when we were living there with the British in control, it was very pleasant. We had no troubles. But when the British moved out, we had to move. So 4 years later, we left and we were moved with our crew to Libya. And we
Okay.
lived then in Libya for a couple of years. And let's see, we moved out of South Arabia with the British, and then we moved out of Libya during the 6-Day War. And we moved
Now,
back.
that would have been up in 67, the Six-Day War.
Yes.
So, okay, so
And
you
then
were
we-
really over there from 52 to almost 70, weren't you? You were, what, about 18 years?
Well, we went back. We were shipped back to Argentina for
Uh-huh.
a while, and we ran into some difficulty in Argentina. The Tupamaros invaded us one evening and left us bound and gagged after being tied up all night, and we were shipped back to the States. And I finally ended up in the office in Chicago with overseas arrangements where I had crews in Thailand and in Africa. And finally in, when, I can't remember when, 82, I think, we were shipped to Indonesia for 4 years. And we lived in
Jakarta.
Jakarta, Indonesia. And finally we...
I tell you what,
I
you
hit
guys have
60
literally
years.
lived all over the world. I'm going to come back and talk about that experience though in Argentina and what life was like, particularly in the early days in the Middle East. I'm Glenn Howard, Senior World Radio. We're going to have to take a break for just a moment, but I'm having the privilege today of visiting with Russell and Nell Long. Russell's 90. Nell's a couple of years older. She's 92. Both of them extremely good health, young, spry, sharp. I met them the other day out at one of our big map presentations, and their stories are just so fascinating. I wanted to share with our listening audience. So we're going to take a break, do some commercials. We're coming right back, so please don't go away.
You're nobody till somebody loves you.
Have you ever had a problem, but it seemed like there was no one who could help? You spent hours calling around, being referred from one place to the next. Well, not anymore. I want to tell you about a free and easy-to-use service in Oklahoma. 211 is a simple 3-digit phone number to get help or to give help when you don't know where to turn. Dialing 211 only takes a minute, and you are connected with a caring Oklahoman who will help you find the assistance you've been looking for. With access to over 13,000 programs, Heartline 211 can connect you to local resources for many different needs, including health care, food, counseling, rent assistance, disability assistance, job services, and much more. 211 is a service of Heartline, a United Way partner agency. 211, the right first call to get help or give help 24 hours a day.
Hi, my name's Jason Ledlow, president of UT Phone, the ultimate telephone service. We're proud to be a sponsor of Senior World Radio with Glenn Howard. UT Phone is dedicated to providing Oklahomans affordable telephone service all across our great state. We have Lifeline Home Phone service starting at just $1.95. That's right, just $1.95, and most of Oklahoma's seniors qualify for this reduced home phone service. They get to keep their old home phone number, and it even includes long distance. Another great feature of UT Phone's customers really like is that it includes repair service. That's right, any repairs at no additional charge. With many telephone services charging $40 to $50 per month, it makes sense to switch your service to UT Phone. This service is a federal program that is provided through the Universal Service Fund. There is only one per household, so make it UT Phone's home phone service for $1.95. Give us a call at 800-996-0098. Again, call 800-996-0098.
I've made up my mind.
And welcome back to Senior World Radio. I'm Glenn Howard, visiting today with Russell Long. No, not the senator from Louisiana. He's been dead for a few years. This Russell Long is very much alive, a 90-year-old kid who has some incredible stories with his lovely wife, Nell, a couple of years older. They started out in Oklahoma, got married, traveled around the world, lived in Saudi Arabia, lived in Libya, actually was involved in flight with bombers in the Bermuda Triangle, all kind of stories. But Russell, I want to go back and talk just a little bit about your experience in Argentina. When you were living there, working with an oil company, you guys got yourselves in trouble down there, didn't you?
Well, we later got into trouble, but at first, the first year we were there, it was very pleasant, and we met some very nice people who didn't speak a lot of English, so we kind of worked on our Spanish for a while. Mm-hmm. And I was making maps with 4-digit numbers on the shot points, and my help were all Argentine who spoke no English, so I learned to speak numbers in Spanish quite well. So after making maps for a few years, we learned to enjoy Patagonia. We later moved into Buenos Aires. And,
but now you got in trouble there, did you not?
Well, this was later.
Okay.
We were living in Buenos Aires, and we were finally shipped off to where? To Libya. We finished some work in Argentina and went to Libya, where we had a crew that was working, and then we were transferred to South Arabia, to Aden, which is a British protectorate. And after 4 years there, we were transferred to Libya. And eventually back to Argentina again.
Okay, now is that the time you were kidnapped, really? Was that?
No, that was later. We were back to Argentina.
Okay.
We went back to Argentina the second time, and after about 2 years, one night we had driven our car downtown in Buenos Aires, and when we came home, we were met at the door by 4 Tupamaros who escorted us inside. Each one of them had a gun, and they took us into our den and seated us on the floor and tied us up, and gagged us because they didn't want the neighbors to hear us, and they wanted to know where our maid was, and we told her she's upstairs. She's up in the 3rd floor. So they went up, got her, and brought her down, and we were tied there for the rest of the evening. That was about 11 o'clock at night, and then we were tied there listening to them demanding "Donde está la caja fuerte?" And la caja fuerte is the strong box. People in Argentina didn't have banks then. They had to have a strong box built into their house, so they knew we'd have a strong box somewhere. Unfortunately, we didn't have. I'd have given it to them. But at any rate, they kept sticking this gun, one of them at a time, kept a gun in my ear all night demanding the caja fuerte, and I kept sending them to different places to look where I knew there wasn't anything. And they kept looking under all the pictures on the walls for strong boxes, that what have you. And finally, 6 o'clock in the morning, they had us bound and gagged. Bound and gagged, and they went out and they were taking our new car. We had the newest car in Argentina. We'd had it shipped down on the deck of a ocean liner. And they finally wrapped everything up. They'd stolen everything they could and put it in the back of the car, and they were going to drive it away. And pretty soon they came back in. It was 6 o'clock, and they had us all bound and gagged. And they came in and they untied our son, who was 8 years old. And we thought, boy, they're kidnapping him. And they untied him and took him out. And about 5 minutes later, they brought him back and tied him up again. And the next morning when we got loose, well, we said, David, why did they take you out? And he says, oh, they couldn't get the garage door open. So we were thankful they brought him back.
This has got to be a scary time for you.
It was.
You're kidnapped, you're gagged and tied up, and your son's carried out. How do you deal with that as a mother and a wife?
Well, to start with, they took my lipstick and wrote Perron Vuelve all over our walls and urinated on all my furniture, which was pretty much difficult to take care of. But they kept telling me that I had to shut up. Whenever I spoke in Spanish, I was told to shut up. And so you learn to cope as best as you can. But it was hard on our son because he had to go to school the next morning. And as soon as he got there, and of course their word was out that we had been bothered by these people, they had called an assembly, and he had to get up and speak in front of 200 children and explain what had happened to him the night before.
Wow.
To this day, whenever it comes up, he gives me a look and says, please, Mom, let's not talk about it.
Don't talk about it.
It was just too much for him.
I can imagine so. It's hard to even imagine what that would be like. You know, I lived in the Philippines for 7 years, in Budapest, Hungary for 10 years, but it was a very pleasant thing. In fact, nothing of any kind like this. The idea of being kidnapped, tied up, made demands, particularly when your son was carried out, that has got to be overwhelming. But
that scared us to death, really.
I can imagine.
But the company did a very nice thing for me. They shipped me back to New Orleans, and gave me a job interpreting seismic records, and I had my head down working for a year until I got it back together.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
In the time we've got left, let's switch back over to the Middle East. You lived in Saudi Arabia, in Libya.
Well,
this
not
was all
Saudi Arabia, Aden,
right.
which is south
of it.
point of
Right.
Saudi Arabia.
This was all during the time, though, of the restoration of Israel, 1948, up through the 67 war. Did you have any experiences in the Middle East in regard to the Israel, Middle East conflicts?
Not at all. They treated us very well, except, during the 6-Day War, of course, they evacuated anyone who thought they should leave. So Nell and our son were evacuated. We didn't know where they were going, but they went to Italy, which was a pretty nice vacation, actually, if they didn't have to think about it. Anyway,
that was by the U.S.
stayed,
government, or was it the company that did that for you?
Who?
Was it the company that...
No, the Air Force.
The Air Force did it, okay.
The Air Force did it, and I stayed to guard the dynamite, I guess. And one day our field foreman called up and says, my helpers out here are getting kind of restless. What do you think I should do with the dynamite? I told him, blow it up, which he did.
Okay.
So 6 weeks later or so, when things calmed down and we could go back to work, we didn't have any dynamite to go to work with, so we had to borrow from our friends, other oil companies in other locations, had a little bit. So that worked out well.
What was the attitude of the people at that time toward you as an American? Were you welcomed warmly, or did you feel, being the foreigner?
Well, we didn't have a lot of contact with the local people, but the ones that we did know treated us very well. We didn't have any difficulties, and our servants were our servants. Mm-hmm. I mean, they did their job as they were expected to.
Nell, were you feeling kind of insecure in this?
I managed. I learned wherever we went, I learned enough of the language to be able to speak with the people, and they appreciated that.
Yes.
No matter how little it was or how much, knowing that I made the attempt. was enough for them. So I learned Bahasa, Indonesian, I learned Italian, I learned Spanish. My parents were from Lithuania, so I speak, write, and read in Lithuanian and interpret for people in Lithuanian.
Now, Lithuanian is very similar to Russian, isn't it?
Well, it's between Russian and Polish, and
Okay.
all three of the countries are quite comparable.
So a good background in language was a very real benefit to you.
It was, very much so.
The idea of running around the world, though, living in various places, different cultures, did you find that an exciting thing, or did you find it kind of overwhelming sometime?
At times it was just a little bit too much, but you learn to cope because this is the life you chose to live.
Right.
So you just go on, pick up your boots and go on.
Now, you mentioned a while ago, David, you have one son. How many
One
children
son.
do you have?
We had one miscarriage
Okay,
while we were in
so
Argentina.
just the one son.
Just the one son.
What do you think the impact of living overseas has been on him now as an adult?
He's enjoyed it very much. He still speaks about it, and we've been able to take him traveling after he had grown some. So we take trips, boat trips, and travel all over the world.
And I'm sure now, being retired, living in a nice retirement center, looking back over the world of memories that just keep coming up and reliving and enjoying it, it's great being a senior and enjoying retirement, isn't it?
It is.
It's a little busy. Well, our son has 2 children,
Right.
and both he and our grandson got their master's degrees in computer science, so they come by and bring my computer up to date often.
There you go. So enjoying the grandkids. Listen, it's been so
Yes.
great having you guys in today. I'm Glenn Howard, Senior World Radio. We've been visiting with Russell and Nell Long, one of the most interesting couples I've met in a long time. Russell's 90, Nell's 92. They've lived all over the world and had wonderful experiences. If you have suggestions of incredible seniors you'd like to have as guests on our show, give me a call, 877-875-0990. We'd love to have them on and get a chance to visit with them. Russell, Nell, thanks for coming in. It's been a delight to have you. And
Thank you very much.
We just wish you the very best. We
Thank
got to
you.
go, but we'll be back again this same time next week. Until that time, take care of yourselves. Be good to everybody you know. Do something good for somebody, especially yourself. We'll see you this time next week. Bye-bye now.
I'm on the top of the world looking down on creation, and the only explanation I can find